And may we have roll call, please?
Chairman Copen,
Here.
Deputy Mayor Nelson. Here. Councilman Arnone.
Here.
Councilman Bosco.
Here.
Councilman Crowley.
Here.
Councilman Edgar.
Here.
Councilman Hall.
Here.
Councilman Kensler.
Here.
Councilman Lee.
Here.
Councilman Mangini. And Councilman Stokes.
Here.
We have 10 in attendance and 1 absent.
First item on our agenda is discussion resolution authorizing the town manager to sign a memorandum of understanding regarding school safety and security. Whereas the Enfield Town Council and the Enfield Board of Education appointed a subcommittee of their two bodies to make recommendations to enhance the safety and security of the public schools, known as the Town Council Board of Education Security Committee, now referred to as the committee. And whereas the Enfield Board of Education wishes to formalize the security recommendations by the committee in order to provide enhanced safety and security to the students and employees of the Enfield Public Schools. And whereas the Enfield Town Council agrees with this goal and wishes to take the steps necessary to implement the recommendations of the committee. And whereas the Enfield Board of Education and the Town Council have drafted a memorandum of understanding between the two parties that contains the steps necessary to implement the recommendations. Now therefore be it resolved that the Enfield Town Council does hereby adopt a memorandum of understanding between the Town of Enfield and the Board of Education regarding school safety and security initiatives jointly enacted, hereto attached as Attachment A. And now therefore be it further resolved that the Enfield Town Council does hereby authorize the town manager to execute the necessary documents to implement recommendations of the committee.
So moved.
Moved by Councilman Hall, seconded by Councilman Stokes. Is there any presentation by the joint committee, or you want to lead off discussion, or do we go right to any questions or comments?
I can lead off discussion. I just want to say that for nearly 3 months now, we have been working on a comprehensive security plan for the school district, and mainly we started with the K through 12 schools in our district. We're going to further on with the committee to obviously address many other areas in our district and our community for security. This work has been done by the Board of Ed representatives, law enforcement, public safety, town management, myself and Carol Hall and Cindy Mangini. And I'll just simply say that I think that the final result, although it is not something any of us ever imagined wanting to place in, and we hope for a day that maybe this is not necessary, but because of the times, the one component of having the armed security, we believe that it is necessary, although unfortunate. And there are many folks out there who have different opinions about this, but in our seats, we would better prepare and better be ready for something that could happen, even though it may never, to protect the safety of our children. So basically, I'll just leave it at that. So,
Thanks, Greg. Any further comments, questions? Red? Go ahead, Councilman Edgar.
As I read through this, it doesn't take into parochial schools.
Not at this point in time. The next step by the joint committee is that there will be discussions with the parochial schools.
and go ahead, Carol. You probably can address better than I could.
Just so you know, Red, in the next meeting, we had asked Kevin to have all the legal opinions ready to talk about the parochial schools and where we can go and what we can do. So this Wednesday, we're going to be actually discussing that and have some answers on that. So I know collectively we had talked about it in executive session, but we've also talked about it publicly, that the council and the majority of the Board of Ed, I believe, are behind us supporting the parochial schools in that aspect. So
Right.
we're definitely working on it. It's just the legal side of it. We're waiting for Kevin to come forward with some of his opinions.
Well, personally, I wouldn't want to leave them out.
Oh, I agree.
Okay.
I agree with you 100%.
And that's the agreement of the entire committee.
Yep.
Okay. Now, they cite Connecticut General Statute, Section 53A 19. my question to you in regards to that, if there's a scuffle in school or a fight in school, what does the security officer, what are his duties in that?
You should refer it to Kevin.
Yeah.
Kevin, or the chief,
Chief.
and Chris.
Chris, you might want to come up.
I don't think, I don't know the answer.
Sure. Go. Come on up.
Carl, can you come up to the microphone?
Mr. Eggers, we proceeded through this committee. We talked about this is a working document that as time goes on, things may change. The officers that we're putting in there, the security officers, will be equipped with communications to the police department. Obviously, they'll have brand-new portable radios. Their first responsibility is to notify the department that an officer is needed. Currently in the school system, if there's a scuffle, the teachers break them apart. I don't envision that the security officer would be by, the first line of defense. The teachers can handle it the way they have. If he needed help and the officer's there, he would assist in any way that he could, any way that was appropriate, but not to take away from the fact that the police department would be responding like we do now in all these cases. So, yeah, he'd have a role in that. I can't tell you tonight specifically because we haven't put together until we get the blessing to go forward with what the curriculum's going to be for his training. But he would assist, he'd be there to help, but not in lieu of a police officer. We expect the police are going to respond, but he's going to also be there with communications to call him as soon as he can.
Is he, is he going to be allowed to restrain a person?
I think that's, depends on the situation, what's going on. I know the agreement is that he's not going to act as a police officer, but under the use of force statutes, any citizen who sees an assault taking place can use reasonable measures to prevent an assault. So I don't think we would give him any lesser authority than any private citizen would have.
Okay. But he will not have powers of arrest.
You have no powers of arrest whatsoever.
No, I mean, you define deadly physical force to protect himself or a third party. And when you said third party, that's what led to the questions.
Mm-hmm.
How do you define great bodily harm?
The same way the statute applies to everybody now. If you're in fear of imminent, serious bodily harm or death, you're allowed to take deadly force to protect yourself or a third person. That's not authority we're granting this security officer. That's the authority that every citizen enjoys in the state of Connecticut, and we took it right from the state statute. So great bodily harm, obviously, you could look at case law, would talk about, not a punch type of thing, but an imminent threat. And imminent's the key word, that someone's about to take your life or cause you serious bodily harm, loss of a body function or something of that nature.
Okay. And when you say that he can respond to serious emergencies and other serious security concerns, and you use the word serious in both.
Yeah, I didn't draft that, so I'm not, the people that drafted it, I don't know what their intent was for that. But, obviously he's there to secure the well-being of all the students, the staff, and the people in the building. And again, we're relying on our police department to be the primary response. In the interim, if he's there and he can assist in some way, we wouldn't deny that. But to define tonight what that is, when we were going into an area we've never had before, I couldn't do that tonight.
Have you given any thought if there's a serious altercation in school where somebody tries to take his weapon from him, what the position will be there for him?
Sure. And you know what? That's one of the reasons why the committee unanimously agreed, and myself also, that the people we're looking to hire are not people that are unfamiliar with firearms. Every intent is going to be made that these are bona fide law enforcement personnel that have retired. And I maintain the fact that if you put 25 or 30 years in as a police officer, you retire on a Friday, just because Monday comes and you're retired, all the skills, all the tactical training, and all the skills you've learned over the years, you have them. Weapon retention being one of them, that's what officers learn. Just because he's retired doesn't mean he's unfamiliar with those ideas, and that's why we think that he would do what any police officer, anybody would do to defend himself if someone tried to take his weapon. But like I said, these are people that have been on the street for 25, 30, 20 years, and it's the same risk they had as a police officer, and now they're just transitioning it into the school. The uniform's different, the power of arrest is gone, but his ability and what he's learned over the years stays with him, and that's why the committee went with the recommendation to go with retired law enforcement or police personnel, if at all possible.
Supposing I or one of my children were to walk through the school with their backpack on, and your security officer was told by other people that there was contraband in that backpack, yet you say he can't search it, he's got to wait until you come in with a search warrant? Or
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that again. That what you have before you is the memorandum that was drafted between the attorneys. With respect to contraband, if you're referring to illegal substances and drugs, no, he's not empowered to look at that. But if there's any reasonable reason to believe there's a firearm in there, just like the principal does now, we would act on that immediately. Our intent is not to look for any type of contraband, do investigations, conduct search and seizures randomly. It is specifically and narrowly limited to his ability to keep that building safe, at least until the police can get there, and then they can determine whether the contraband and the search and seizure laws would allow them to search further.
But a weapon is contraband.
Possession of weapon in a school is illegal by definition, and that would be contraband.
Yet our person here cannot look at that.
No, I didn't say that.
That's what it says here.
Yeah, but again, Mr. Egger, I didn't write that language exactly. It's what it says there. It would be inconsistent to have a security person in that building believe that this person has a firearm and not be able to do anything. We think that once this is all in place, these will be clarified between Mr. Bromson and Mr. Dresnick from the school board.
And Kevin, can you
Sure.
expand on that?
There's one of the issues that we addressed for all the members of the council on the search and seizure. There's different constitutional standards between what school administrators can do in terms of searches and seizures of students and lockers and things like that versus what police officers or non-school officials can do. One of the things we did in trying to draft this was not to put the cart before the horse until those the operating procedures are more fleshed out between how these different pieces are going to work, because there are certain things that school administrators are constitutionally permitted to do that police officers are not with regards to searches and seizures and things like that. So as we work through the protocols of how these will go, we'll probably need at some point to revisit some of these issues in here. We're aware of them. The board's attorney is aware of them. We've had those discussions. I've had those discussions with the chief and members of the committee. But that's where we are now until we get those procedures really fleshed out more. This is the language that we settled on until we can see exactly what we're going to be employing them in what means.
Well, I understand everything you're saying. I think I understand the constitutional rights, and I think I understand 53A19. But when you put this in here, as of right now, if there's contraband in there and it's a firearm, that man cannot go into that backpack or attempt to take it out. That's the way this is worded. And let me finish before dragging it in. I've several other questions. I, for one, and I understand your concern, I understand the work the committee's put into this, but I don't think this is the solution to the problem. And above all, I don't want the schools to start looking like jails.
Thank you, Red. I've got Tom Arnone next, followed by Ken and then Bill.
Couple of things. I preferred school resource officers, so this is basically a compromise for me. And I know in January, the president issued an executive order to provide incentive to schools to hire resource officers, which are sworn police officers that do carry guns. Now, we do have 3 right now assigned to the schools that have been signed. How long, Chief, how long have we had that security details or school resource officers?
Probably a good 15 or 20 years, I would guess.
Yeah, so for 15 to 20 years, we've had armed officers in our schools. I always had a problem with the secretaries being responsible for monitoring the security cameras prior to this tragedy and buzzing people into the buildings. That's really a bad way of doing security. Your secretaries, they're busy doing their work day by day. They have to not only monitor but buzz people in, and you can't do that effectively and know who that person is you're buzzing in. Another issue I had too while researching this, there's 230,000 children abducted by family members each year, and another 58,000 are abducted by non-family members. Now, they say, according to the Department of Justice, 12% of those abductions happen in schools. And people are concerned about the rarity of a shooting. These are not rare. Abductions are not rare. And Chief, I had a question for you. When you have that armed guard at the front door, he's going to be aware of restraining orders. He's going to be aware of custody problems with children. He should have that short list of who can and who cannot pick up those children.
Right, and we believe that as the school security officer is assigned to a specific school, he will work hand in hand with the principal of that building. So any of those concerns that may come up, he would be made aware of, and at the first sign of any potential problems like that, would circumvent a lot of time if he could just get on the radio and get us over there. So absolutely, those are the types of things that are not, we view that as within his purview to do.
Right, and these are unfortunately not somewhat regular occurrences throughout the nation right now. These are national statistics also. Also with, any domestics that happen at the school ground, we've had them in our own town between parents with, again, with estranged mothers and fathers. They'll be able to be there at the door to hopefully summon police, and I don't think a teacher or a person in a suit are really going to have the same authority as someone in a uniform to diffuse these situations before they get out of hand.
Right, and I just want to be very clear. Investigations involving domestic violence, we believe that is solely within the purview of the police officers. He would conduct that investigation. But we can do all these different what-if scenarios. Bottom line is, the security guard is there primarily to protect the security of the people in that building. And we expect him to do, or she do, what is minimally required to keep people safe until police can respond, and then they can, like Mr. Deneen said, we have different rights that we can do and get into investigating. But their primary role, like I said, is to be there to protect the people in that building.
So they'll be checking also for IDs, sign in, sign out, just like almost every building you go in today has that security. And I believe also the magnet schools already have security set up. When you walk in that door, there is a security guard there to make sure that those people, and I'm so much more comfortable with having that. The more and more research I've done on this, that it's just good sense.
Yes, I mean, you're correct about the Craig School. I think they have security guards the minute you walk through the front door. So. And
they escort you right there. You don't have a chance to go anywhere other than the office in that case. The case. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Under the job description, under qualifications.
Can we wait till we get to job description? Just because it's not,
That's a separate.
it's a separate
Okay.
resolution.
Then my question would be is, and this may be under the job description also, hourly wage is $26 an hour. What do we start a police officer at, right out of the academy?
You know, Ken, I don't know the answer to that exactly. I believe when they come in as probationary pay, I'm going to say it's somewhere between $55,000 a year.
So it's somewhere close to 26 bucks an hour.
Like I said,
And I was under the assumption that this was a part-time position, non-benefited?
Yeah.
Where does that state that? I mean, unless I missed it, I don't see it anywhere in either one of these documents. And to elaborate on that, my concern is a teacher's there the same amount of hours. They're not part-time, they're fully benefited. So these officers, security or police, whatever you want to call them, are under the police department. So we know they're going to end up being part of the union. And how do we stop them from becoming benefited positions?
well, first of all, I don't know that. We haven't hired them yet. And you know what? I would defer any questions to whether they have, I mean, you know, there's labor law about who can join
And-
unions and who can't. I wouldn't
And
want
they're
to go
not
there.
directed to you more so, Carl, but
Right.
they're my concerns.
Right.
And along with Councilman Arnone, I support the SROs. And I think we should go with SROs. The pay's not far off. And if we did a program through the police department where they could be non-benefited union officers, you know, as an officer gets ready to retire, he keeps his credentials and he enters the SRO program in Enfield. So they do have arrest powers, so they can search that backpack. And I'm not willing to give up on that. I said from day one, we're going to have full ability to secure and police a school like we should have, like you do, all the residents in Enfield. A school should be no different. I mean, a principal or a teacher, they don't have a clue on how to do security in a school. That is up to you and the public safety office.
If I could say, Ken, just a couple of things. I understand what you're saying. These security guards that we're talking about, these are retired police officers, so they certainly do know how to take care of themselves, how to conduct themselves, how to talk to people. I mean, that skill they've had for 25 years. I think they have that. You know, with respect to, you know, full-time, when people say full-time SROs, there's a little confusion, I think, in the community. SROs are police officers, period. Okay, they work in the school, so we call them SROs. They're police officers. So even if they're retired and you want to do what you want to do, they would still have to maintain their certification, number one. So I haven't concerned myself with the cost piece of this. I'm looking at it from what we need to keep the kids safe. I understand everyone else has to look at that. But the cost would be significant if you went with police officers compared to what we're proposing. Officers that have arrest powers, even if it's part-time, they would have to go to the full academy. They'd have to go for the refresher training. We would have to extend to them all the training that we're mandated to extend now to our officers. So that cost isn't factored in to what you have with the part-time folks. I'm not saying I'm dead set against it. I'm saying that I need somebody in that building that's going to take care of those kids. You folks can decide how you want to pay for it. But what I'm telling you is you can't say it's about just a little bit more to go with sworn officers. I don't think so. I think it's going to be substantially more.
Well, you're getting the same officer, the same exact gentleman. All he's doing is he's not turning in his credentials. He's staying a sworn officer under the Enfield Police Department. He's entering the SRO program, which in the SRO program, I mean, all over the country, they have part-time police officers, different divisions of a police department, crossing guards. They're under you. People don't know that, but this is a different division, and it would be non-benefited police officers. So, I mean, you're not going to get a regular officer to do it because he wants his benefits. But that retired officer, say, I don't even know a police officer's name to mention, but you get one of your officers right now, he's ready to retire. He comes to you and says, Chief, I'd like to be enrolled in the SRO program for my retirement. He's current already with all the academy, with everything. So yes, he would have to stay current with his accreditation or whatever certification, but he's an SRO. And now he can do all those things that our SROs do now, which is, I think, huge in our schools.
But I think you'd also have to extend to him on the other side, if he's in the union, you'd have to negotiate a lot of these things away. Like, are you going to give him health insurance when he's retired? Because officers get health insurance.
Well, it's a non-benefited position.
But if he's going to be in the union,
but that would be something you negotiate with the union. They're already talking that they want to negotiate extra jobs, which I'm not sure I support that, but so they're willing to work to try to be part of this. So
I've had no discussion or conversations with the union president about that. I know there's something they sent out, but I haven't negotiated or even broached that with them at this point.
And then that's not that. But and then my next would be on the hiring part of it. It's to be a unanimous decision between Chris. That's what this says.
It says that each member of the committee has veto power. So that means any one of the three of us, if for whatever reason we don't like that candidate, can exercise that veto and that person would be done.
Right, unanimous. So either they get full support or
Right.
they're out.
Correct.
I mean,
But again, everything you have in that document, if you had given me that document to write it, it may look different. This is that's been negotiated between the two parties.
Carl, I'm looking at you because you're sitting there. You probably should have stayed back there because then I'd be looking over here or at somebody else. Or
Okay.
So
That's right.
I understand, and
Right.
I understand your concerns, and I have the same concerns. I'm just willing, I guess, to take it the next step farther. If we're going to spend $600,000 to $700,000, I'm willing to spend a little bit more and get so much more out of the SRO versus an SSO, who really has no authority to do anything. I mean, you could walk right by this guy. He does not have a right to put his hands on you. So that's my big concerns with this whole thing.
Okay.
And that's it for this. I'll wait for the next one.
Scott, could I address a little bit of that, if I could?
Sure.
Okay, I know that you had others in order, but I just want to, for the chief and for Deputy Mayor Nelson, the chief biggest part is the implementation of a plan that we developed. The MOU, obviously, if I would probably written it myself, I might have adjustments in it myself, but we were working to find favorable agreement between ourselves and the Board of Education because this is in their arena of daily work, and this is in our arena of public safety. And so some of the language is to make sure everybody feels like they're at the table. And I personally have full confidence in the chief or public safety director, our side of it, and Mr. Drezek to work together and only exercise those veto powers that they've said when it's totally necessary. And I think they all would see the evidence of that. Dealing with the area of the SROs, I personally, from day one, thought to myself, put police officers in there. When this all happened, we all said, get our officers over to these buildings, and they did a superb job. What happens here now is kind of I don't want to call it a triage situation. We have an opportunity to approve a memorandum of understanding that places something in action. It doesn't mean that in the next 6 months that as we keep going further, we can begin to investigate if we want to adjust it over to be police officers if we so desire. But when you're in a situation like this, and I've had people tell me, why are you waiting until September? Because that's how long it's going to take. If we were to go right to police officers from our investigation, it would be a lot further off than that. But saying all that, this is a point to where we can do this now And as imperfect as some may feel, because there may be a better option with our police officers, maybe we find, and as we review this, that we need investigative powers, and that's a police officer's role. It's not a security officer's role. That it doesn't hinder us from moving in that realm if the council and the board directs the security committee to begin to investigate that. But I wouldn't hold off doing this now because we don't have the other in place. Because the key thing is we can do this now, and we can come to an agreement with the Board of Ed, and we can protect our children as soon as we possibly can. And then as wisdom grows, and as our knowledge grows, and as whatever happens in our town, the chiefs, more study and stuff, we can adjust. If we see to, we can adjust over to police officers. But to go that route now and change gears now would put a hinder the whole situation. So that's where I'm at. So.
Sure.
So, I mean, the benefits. My big concern with the benefit package is, one, it doesn't say part-time. It doesn't say anything about benefits. I mean, we look at EMS. EMS started non-union. And the first year they went union, and they came to us with a contract, and they negotiated a strong contract. What's to say that these SSOs who work for the police department don't do the same thing? Because we already know we have an issue with the union. And the union brings them in, and then they fight for benefits. And there is nothing in this document that says they're not benefited. So then we end up having to give them benefits, so we end up with SSOs in the union with benefits. I mean, that's my concern, is we're going to end up paying an SSO the same amount of money that we'd pay an SRO. And an SRO has the ability to arrest. Very concerned about that, and it's not here.
And Deputy Mayor, if I may, Mr. Mayor, just briefly, your concerns are valid. I would say that if our legal counsel wants us, as we make the motions, to place in there that they're part-time, we'll look to their advisement on this. The spirit of this is, and all of our discussions have been, that they are part-timers, no benefits. And so if that needs to be in language, I don't have a problem with that. They got to advise us. But here's the key thing, is, we do not want our police officers to feel intruded on. We don't want to create another division of police officers. And if we did anything with our police officers, we'd want them to have a discussion with their chief. We want them at the table to advise us. And I know there's the police officers, some have approached some of us and stuff about the situation and stuff. And here's the thing, we want to hear from them. They got to approach their leadership, go through the proper channels, want to hear from them, because we want the best and the brightest at the table. And I'm open to that. I think the Security Committee would be open to those dialogues there. And but I would say do this now, and let's continue that conversation. And here's the thing, too. The council has to advise and give direction to the committee on where you want us to go, and we will do our due diligence for that. If we need the language, and Matt, you guys can cover if we want to add that to the verbiage when we approve this tonight, I'm all for that. I'm all for that, as having it be part-time, no benefits. If that's got to be stated, I would seek their counsel on that. So. Right.
It's not that anybody approached me. It's, I believe you were given a letter.
Yes, I was.
That supposedly came from the union.
Yes.
I haven't even seen the letter, but it raises a red flag right there that they're
and just for the record, I received the letter, and I appreciate communications from folks and stuff, but I felt that immediately that when I received the letter from a bargaining unit, that I don't want to ever go across the chain of command. I turned it over to the town manager, and I left it alone, because I truly believe that we as elected officials should not be doing that. That should be our administration. They bring it to us. And I would tell to our police union, yes, we want to hear from you. I want to hear what you have to say. But I'm a very go by the chain of command kind of guy. And I think you are, too. Mm-hmm. You and I both are that way.
Thank you, Councilman.
Hey, Matt, just to answer Ken's question, where in your budget, because I have not reviewed the police budget, because typically we handle full versus part-time by the FTE equivalent in the budget book. So where is it?
They are located right after the police department, I believe. I'm trying to remember if you put them before or after. It's right in that general area.
So if there's
so there'll be
Public Safety Administration, Protection of Life and Property, Police Services.
Should be the next is communication.
Communications.
And
okay, school security.
Yes.
But there's no head count page. You know how you've got the position classification page?
Right. 'cause
Which would typically
what-
list the FTEs.
Well, no, we generally stay away from part-time positions
Okay.
listing because, again, whether we have 100 or 10, it's all controlled by the amount of money that's budgeted for them.
So by not having it there, you could say that we're not approving any full-time positions.
Correct, because when you look at it, there's nothing in there for
'Cause we
full-time
use-
salary. It's all
We use
part-time.
these numbers as guides to whether they're full-time or not.
Right.
But,
Yeah, generally, and we've gotten away from that because we get into those situations where if, we have the money for another part-time position, but we don't have a pool of enough people, we need 2 instead of 1, we'd have to come back and redo that. And so we gotten away from that in the past by just budgeting what the allotment is. And we let you know then under the, the detail that this would afford us 6 at this rate or whatever that is.
but we could address his concern by stating in the resolution that these are part-time.
Well, I think.
When we get to that one.
Yeah, what I would recommend, if I can just real quick, generally we don't put in the position descriptions that they're benefited or not benefited, because that's a whole nother arena to get into. But we have, put part-time in there, so I have a possible
Okay.
solution that would address that.
Okay.
But generally, we don't put about benefits in there.
Okay. Bill, you are next.
Yeah, thank you. I guess at this point, it's more of a, I guess it's a comment and a request. For me, this has been a to and fro on the decision, and nearly a 180-degree turnaround from where I was feeling about the whole idea up front. What I will say is that I think the committee and particularly the staff have done an admirable job at kind of laying out the rationale for why this particular component is required at this particular time. What concerns me, though, in identifying the need for a guard in the schools, we came to that conclusion after assessing a lot of different things at each of the facilities. What I really want to know, and I want to know it soon, is what are the next steps in terms of the comprehensive nature of what we're trying to implement. And I think it's critical for the public to have a sense for what we're going to do next, even though I know we're not going to divulge certain details about a particular facility. But I look at the need for additional personnel, particularly armed personnel, as potentially short-term if we do a bunch of other things at these facilities for the long term. And some of these duties may get parsed out to different members of staff, or we may have a permanent security personnel. Whether you determine that they need to be armed for the long term will be something that we'll have to evaluate. But what I appreciate the most was the description of what you're trying to achieve when you described it to us a week or so ago, in that the tactical advantage for having personnel stationed at a door gets, that 3 to 4 minute advantage which you want.
Mr. Lee, if I could just say
Sure.
this, and I think it addresses that point. This afternoon at 1 o'clock, I had about a half-hour phone conversation with the chief from Newtown, Connecticut. Mm-hmm. And I'm going tomorrow to a seminar he's putting on, and I know him a little bit. And we spoke at length, and there's a lot of things that he told me that I can't repeat. There are a lot of things he told me that I have to repeat. And what he told me was this, is that when that morning came in December, they had all the plans that you could have. The staff knew how to train, everything knew how to, the active shooter training was in place, everything was in place. And the game changer was when that individual walked up to the door, couldn't open it, went back to his car, pulled out the gun, and shot out the window. The minute he shot out the window, it was over, because there was nothing in that building to counter that move. Heroic people in there, tremendous principals and teachers, and everyone did what they could, and they all died. And he said to me today that they're going to this. There are some departments that are going to it. And when he said that to me, and I had heard this a few weeks ago when I heard him speak, and what I came to the conclusion of was we can do all kinds of other things that we need to do. And Mr. Bromson here has done a tremendous job with hardening the buildings and doing this. Bottom line is this: if the mental health system fails, if the hardening fails, there's got to be a line of defense before we give up the kids. And what it is this armed person. Mm-hmm. Now, I know in the community there's been a lot of what ifs. What if this and what if that? And I found it ironic that people say, well, it's a very 1 in a million, 1 in 50 million chance that I could win this. And yet this past Saturday, they sold hundreds of millions of Powerball tickets. Your odds of that were 1 in 175 million. But people did it because they were wagering $1 and they can afford it. I refuse to bet the kid, even if it's 1 in a zillion. And that's where I'm at with that.
I think, to answer specifically, though, Bill, we have done a lot of other things, and we are doing other things. This is one piece of it, and you are correct that when we looked at the schools, and we had an assessment team of town personnel from IT to facilities to fire chiefs to myself to the captain. We looked at comprehensive security, how to enhance it from approaching the building, entering the building, communication and technology in the building. And the chief is absolutely right. We did feel that an integral part was the armed security. However, I will tell you, to go to Mr. Edgar's point, this doesn't address a memo of understanding with the parochial schools. But one of the things the committee feels very strongly about is unless they implement the hardening that we're doing in our schools, we would not put a guard there. Mm-hmm. Because a guard alone is not enough. To put a guard in there as a sacrificial lamb at the front door and not address all the other concerns would be negligent. And it wouldn't be in his best interest or the school, and it would be a false sense of security. So we won't be able to talk about everything. But that day in Sandy Hook, they did not have the enhanced security that we are contemplating for all of our schools. And if they had, he may not have entered. All right? We've got to be prepared that if he does, as Carl said, then the game is over. So we've got to do everything to slow and stop him from entering. And ultimately, we believe we have to have somebody there to confront him if all else fails. Yeah. But we are doing a lot. And to speak to the time frame, this Wednesday morning, we will be talking about all of those other programs once we know that this is in place. We have gotten quotes. We have contractors from security people to local contractors. If you look, and it's been released, the interim report from Sandy Hook that the Governor's Commission authored, everything in there that they've recommended, we're doing. So we don't have to give a complete blueprint and let everybody know specifically, but we left no stone unturned. We've been to national conferences. We continue to go and seek and garner information, but I can assure you and the public that everything that I think that can be done, that's humanly possible to secure the buildings, we are contemplating. The manager has already looked at funding. It'll be some this year in the budget, some next year. But I do echo the chief. We still believe if all else fails, we do need that armed person there to rebut the threat. But I think just to put him in alone and not do these other things, sure, that wouldn't be prudent.
Yeah, I agree. And I know I've said this to you guys before, and I said it to a parent this afternoon. I think we owe our employees and the students and their parents no less of a safe environment than they expect themselves at their own place of employment. As this was kind of developing over the last few months, I've been at some of my own customers where I've encountered, 3 and 4 steps of security, that start in the parking lot, start by being buzzed in, move to a guard who then has to sign me in. You give up ID, you're walking through layers of ballistic glass, and these aren't secure entities. These are insurance companies and manufacturers in the neighborhood. So I'm comfortable with the plan. I'll be voting yes tonight. I appreciate the way that you've gone about this, and certainly the comprehensive nature that the committee is taking is really going to be what backs up this person at the door. And all the training that goes along with the staff and town personnel, behind that. So Thank you, and I'll be looking forward to hearing the next steps as they come out.
Thank you, Bill. Next, Councilman Kienzler.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank Carl, Chris, and the committee and the staff for everything they've done with this. And I know behind the scenes, sometimes a lot of people out there in the public don't realize how much effort, time, energy, research went into this, and it is amazing. It's a very emotional issue. I remember the first few weeks after Sandy Hook, this room filled with, out in the hallway filled with, I was out in the hallway for an hour after a council meeting talking to a group of parents who demanded all the things they wanted done immediately to protect the kids, all the way up to turning it into Fort Knox, arming teachers. I mean, it was a pounding of the fists on the table. We cannot let this happen here. We need to do this now. To another extreme where lately we've been hearing about we cannot have a gun in the school, no matter what. We have to go after other solutions that involve mental health and counseling and things like that. So there is no perfect answer in my mind to this. I just can't sit here and say that's the right answer. But what I can say is that at the end of the day, this is going to happen again. I don't care what anyone says, what the millions to one chances are. There are people out there right now plotting to do something bigger. That's human nature for crazy people, and we have enough of them in this country to go around. There doesn't a day go by where some major city in the country stops something like this from becoming national headlines because they catch somebody doing something or planning something. And you find the carload of explosives or the cache of guns or the kid who got a hold of contraband weapons. So I am going to vote for this, and it's not easy to vote for it. It's not my perfect solution, but I'm not going to be Roy Scheider on the dock in the movie Jaws when the woman comes up in 10 years and says to me, you could have done something about this and you didn't. It's not about the money. Yeah, it's going to hurt. It's going to be some money. It's not going to take out of other programs. I don't think anybody in this council is looking at it that way. I certainly am not. So I'll still be a fan of all-day kindergarten, and I'll be a fan of this. So that's where I am. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Next is Councilman Bosco.
I'm not against this. But that being said, I'm not 100% for this. There's still a lot of things here that I'm not comfortable with. There's still a lot of things that I'd like to see addressed. I don't feel and I know the committee did a lot and you guys did a lot, but I don't feel we did enough, especially as a caucus, to come to a conclusion that I could feel comfortable with this. In here, there's nothing saying we're going to give the Board of Education an MOU. What happens if we can't fill the positions come September 1st? Or the first day of school? There's nothing's been told to me. I do know that there's police officers that would be willing to do this as a second job or a part-time job. I mean, I haven't heard nothing on that. There's, are these guards going to have some kind of non-lethal force with them? I mean, I just really would hate to see the only option this guard has is to kill somebody or let them go. I mean, there should be something with some non-lethal force in here. They should have, of all things, they should have tasers in there so they could subdue someone that's maybe not going to kill somebody, but could cause a lot of problems. This is just way too vague for me. And again, I'm not against it. By all means, I'm not against it, but I can't vote for something that I don't feel comfortable with or don't have enough information to make an educated decision. And, if you told me you were spending $600,000 to fortify the schools, I'd be 100% for that. You told me it's a $1.3 million to make the school. We're putting bulletproof glass in all the bottoms of the schools. I'd have no problem spending that money to make our students safe. And I am a firm believer the only way to stop a bad guy with a gun is with a gun. But, again, that being said, there's not enough in here to make this comfortable for me, and I just would like to just have some time to talk this out and get the answers so I can vote for it, because I think it's probably something that's necessary, but until we have a lot of stuff addressed on here, it's tough. I mean, you know, I don't know. I just, this is something that's going to be done with a real heavy heart, but until I get the answers that I'm comfortable with, I cannot spend $600,000. I can't spend $60 unless I felt comfortable that the answers that I need were covered.
Thank you, Joe. Next is Councilman Crowley.
Thanks, Mayor. I, like Councilman Lee, have gone back and forth on this quite a few times. And I've talked to a lot of kids, see how they feel. Years ago, back when, actually after I was out of school, but they brought DARE officers into school, and people had a little eerie feeling about police officers being in school. Well, the DARE officers turned out to be a very positive thing, and some great programs came out of that. And then we progressed on to SROs, and I'll tell you, we've had a great outcome with kids with SROs. I talked to my kids the other day, and I sat them down and asked them about this, and what the first thing they said to me was, as long as we don't lose Officer George, we want Officer George at our school. He's our friend. We know that. And I said, well, how would you feel, you know, if we added to it? And they said they were very comfortable with it. You know, somehow, I think the picture's being painted of a guy standing there in front door with an AK-47, fortifying the whole place. I do want to see the place fortified. I don't want it to look like a prison, as people said. But I also agree with Joe, what he said. The only way to stop somebody with a gun, unfortunately, is with a gun. Yelling for him to stop is not going to do it. It was said, what are these guys going to do? And in all seriousness, I stand back and I think about this and I say, I really want them to be reasonable. I'm not asking them to grab somebody, throw them on the ground, and rip open their backpack if they think something's wrong, but be reasonable. You were a cop for 20 or 30 years. You used your ability as an officer. You got hired by a team that has looked at you and has the right to veto you out at any point in time. Just do the right thing. If my kid's the kid laying there and someone's beating on him, I would like that guy to go over and grab that kid off him. I have no problem with that. I want a teacher to do it. I want a principal to do it. I want anyone to do it, or any kid. I don't want to see any kid get beat up or hurt. So if a guy's standing there and there's something going on there, he better help out, because then he's going to have somebody else to answer to, that parent of the kid that's laying on the ground. I think we're being foolish by saying he can't do this and he can't do that. We need to be reasonable, you know? We have armed people in school now. We've had it for quite some time, since DARE and since the SROs went in there. And all these incidents that we're hearing people talk about have not occurred, okay? I've tried to look at both sides of this. You know, I even went as far as to call around to some of the state colleges to see how we handle it at that level. And every four-year college in the state of Connecticut has their own police force. Not just an armed guard, but their own police force. And the other schools have armed guards. Esnuntic has the Murphy group there. I don't know if they're armed or not, but they're there too. I mean, there's some form of security at all the state schools. So, and I think someone mentioned CREC already, where CREC is going to, how they do it. We went down to the basketball Final Four down in New Haven, Wilbur-Cross High School. There had to be, no lie, close to 15 officers there at the door, and you went through a metal detector to get into school. Everyone went through the metal detector. Everyone, the team, everything. Everyone went through a metal detector. So it could get to that point at some point in time, I think, if things got worse. We're not there yet. We're not under track. We're not there yet. But I do feel comfortable with the way this is going.
this MOU, this is a living document. It's like anything else. It's like how you play the stock market or anything else. If things ain't working, you change it. And that's what I think this MOU is all about. I think it's about change. If this isn't working, we look for another path to take, but we're taking a positive path. That's the key. You know, I think if you go home and you tell your kids, you know, hey guys, go to school tomorrow, it's going to be great. You know, you can go play and have fun, go to recess. And we have a guy standing at the front door, they're not going to care. They're not going to care. Hopefully they're not even thinking about it. I don't want our elementary kids thinking about it. As I said, I don't think the guy's going to be standing there with an AK-47 greeting the kids as they come through the door. He's going to be pleasant to the person. Just try to be reasonable when we're thinking about this, and that's what I'm trying to do. This guy's going to be another set of eyes in the school. So he's not there to hurt anybody. He's not there to attack anybody. But if something does happen, he's an extra set of eyes for the principal, for the teachers, for the parents. I was dead set against this when I found out that the only, as Joe was talking about, the only thing he had was a gun. But the more I've looked into it and the more I've talked to people about this, you know what? At least he has a gun. I don't want him pulling it out when a parent and a teacher are arguing. But on the other hand, I want him to step in the middle and say, okay, guys, calm down. You know, we have kids here. You know, take the adult thing, take the right thing to do. I just think if we look at this in a positive light instead of a negative light, we're going to get a lot more out of it. I trust you guys to hire the right people and do the right thing. I trust the principals to know if someone's not working out, they're going to turn around and make a phone call and say, you know, this officer's not working, or this security guy's not working out in my school. I need a change. And if we don't have enough guys to start, and maybe we can get some officers to start in September, if we have to fill the backlog with overtime, whatever it is to get it done, let's get it done. But let's not take 5 steps backwards and bury our heads in the sand. And as Councilman Kinsler said, I don't want a parent ever to come up to me and say, you voted no, and stare at my face. I can't live with that. So without a doubt, I'm going to be voting yes on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. Next is Councilman Hall.
I can't add to a lot of what's been said. I think everybody's really put their feelings and their heart into what they've said tonight. But what I do know is that this committee worked extremely hard, and at some point there's got to be a level of faith that you have in your staff and the people that you've put in charge of this program. And at this point, the time and effort that's been put into this, as many of you have said, it's not a perfect document, but it's as good as it gets. And I don't want to put my head in the sand and say, well, you know, maybe if this I was dotted and this T was crossed, I might vote for it. We've done that. Believe me, in this committee, we've done that. And you've just got to take this leap of faith that it is a living document, like Pat said. There's going to be changes to it. There's going to be adjustments, and we have to have faith that our staff will come to us with whatever changes and adjustments they need to do. So the option to me is you do nothing, and quite frankly, to do nothing, you may end up with dead children, and I'm not okay with that. I'm just not okay, and that's the hard, plain fact of it. So I will be supporting this. I think I wish we could have done it a little sooner, but we did cross all the T's and dot all the I's, and that's why we have the document we do today. So I'm ready to vote. I hope the Board of Ed moves us forward tomorrow and doesn't delay, because it's only going to put us behind the 8 ball with hiring these folks. So that's where I am, and I would love to see everybody support it. I hope people that are on the fence rethink their position, because this is way too important to vote no or not support this initiative.
Thank you, Carol. I received an email from Councilman Mangini, and Cindy was not able to be here this evening because of a personal commitment that she could not get out of, health-wise, but she's fine. But and so she said, please pass along my regrets for not being able to attend the meeting tonight. I am sending you this email in support of the MOU between the Town of Enfield and the Board of Education for the school security vote. As a member of the School-Town Security Subcommittee, I will attest to the fact that much detail and time was put in by every member of the committee. After many weeks of reviewing materials presented by the professionals, it was a unanimous decision to bring forward this plan. I am not only comfortable with our decision, but I am also confident that we have attained our goal, which is to make every attempt to ensure the safety of our children. And she asked that I read that to the council this evening. I also received 3 letters or emails from residents over the past couple of days, which I did forward out to the entire council. Since there's not the public discussion at a special meeting, I told the folks that I'd pass the letters to the council and submit to the town clerk for attachment into the record. So we did receive a letter from Lori Gates, from Ray Gush, and from Nick Ide. And so if these could be put into the official record as being received, that would be appreciated. And then finally, for my comments, I want to thank the Joint Committee. You did yeoman's work and a very tough job. Many meetings, long hours. I know there was a lot of discussion and debate back and forth. And I believe you came up with the best plan for Enfield at this time. And none of us know if it's the right plan, if it's the perfect plan. And we all hope that it's a plan that we never know whether it's the correct one or not. So that means nothing bad has come to our school system. But I do think it's part of a comprehensive plan that you folks have put together, and that we would be remiss in our responsibilities as elected leaders to take the actions that we deem necessary. And I also, as Councilman Hall stated, I fall back on the expertise of our law enforcement and our security experts. I'm not one to, I would not even begin to say whether something else would be better or more appropriate for our schools. To me, that's not my job. I prefer to defer to the experts. They've come up with a plan. Many of you have mentioned that it's a living document, and I've sat through a couple meetings with the school administration and our attorneys and their attorney to come up with the MOU that we thought best addressed your concerns that were addressed to us at the last council meeting and executive session. And again, this is a process that we're providing security for our public schools, and we have a partner in the Board of Education in the school system that they have a say as well. And it's their school system. And they're our elected leaders, and they run the school system. And God, if we were on the Board of Education, we might do things differently. And if they were sitting here on the town council, they might do something different. But we've come together and we've reached consensus that this is the memorandum of understanding that both sides, based on our meetings, support. Now, this brings us to our formal actions here tonight, and hopefully by the Board of Education tomorrow evening. So again, I support the plan. I think we need to do a job as well, is to get out all of the what is the whole plan, because that's the piece, and someone mentioned as well. That's where a lot of comments I'm getting are, I don't know about the security officers, but why aren't you doing the hardening of the schools and the training of the students and the training of, but that is part of the plan. And so that's why my comment back to so many people is come out Wednesday night, 7 o'clock at Enfield High School, where the entire plan will be presented. And I think if you sit through that process, you'll see how you're able to connect the hardening of the schools, the training of of students and faculty and staff at the schools, the training of our police officers, the training of SSOs, and then the responsibility and the role of the SSO while on the job at the school. And I think you'll see that it does tie together, and it makes our school system safer. It's not the be-all, end-all, because as Councilman Kensler said, there's someone out there now plotting to do a more horrific act. But if we're prepared and we have the ability at least to prevent it from happening, our kids are somewhat safer than they are today. So with that, I support it. Everyone's had their opportunity to speak. Is there anyone else that wishes to say anything before we go to vote? Sensing none, roll call, please.
Mayor Copen,
4.
Deputy Mayor Nelson,
Against.
Councilman Arnone,
4.
Councilman Bosco,
Against.
Councilman Crowley,
4.
Councilman Edgar,
Against.
Councilman Hall,
4.
let me see where am I now? Councilman Lee
4.
and Councilman Stokes.
4.
We have seven in favor.
You forgot Councilman
Oops,
Kensler.
sorry. Councilman Kensler.
4.
We have 7 in favor and 3 against.
Thank you, Jeanette. Next item is discussion resolution adopting the Armed Security Officer job description. Resolved that in accordance with Chapter 7, Section 2 of the Town Charter, the Enfield Town Council does hereby amend the classification plan to include the following new job description in the town budget for fiscal year 13-14 for the police department.
So moved.
Moved by Deputy Mayor Nelson, seconded by Councilman Hall. Matt?
What I'd recommend is under the title, where it currently says Armed School Security Officer, I would add in parentheses part-time.
So after officer, parenthesis, part-time.
Correct.
Okay, in the form of a motion, that was by Councilman Lee, seconded by Councilman Kensler. Is there discussion on the amendment, adding the words part-time to the title of the job description? Then by a show of hands, all those in favor of the amendment? Those opposed? Unanimous on the amendment. Now discussion on the resolution as amended. Deputy Mayor Nelson.
Okay, on the part-time, is there what's the hours for a part-time person before they're benefited?
We're keeping it less than 30 hours a week.
So we will not have the same SRO in a school all 5 days? SSO.
Yeah, do you want to address that?
Mr. Nelson, the plan is to assign SSOs to the same school. The plan is to have 2 assigned to the school. One would work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. That would do 24 hours. The next would do, the second person would do Thursday and Friday. That's 16 hours. Then the next week they can swap. But it would be the same 2 people to become part of the culture of that school. So it would be the same. And I would add that I think that's a good idea. But also, the Board of Education was pretty clear that they think that works better for their principal, not to have a different person every day. So in essence, there'll be 2 people they'll be seeing all the time.
Through the mayor to the chief, having those 2 positions in a school, say somebody calls in sick at one of the other schools or something, is it possible to use one of those SSO officers
Sure,
to fill in?
Right. The plan would be that because you have to keep it under 29, 30 hours, if he called in sick on Monday, his partner that only does 2 days could use that extra day. And if he can't do it, I have 11 other people working 2 days. That the plan is to use those folks.
And then all else fails, you would use a uniformed officer?
If all else fails, there will never be a time, just like there isn't now with crossing guards. If a crossing guard calls in sick, we don't say, well, there's no crossing guard today. One way, shape, or form, that school will be covered.
Now, would it be an extra job, or would it be pulling an officer off the street?
I can't answer that, Ken, right now. It definitely cannot be using officers off the street, because we still have to respond to take care of the town. So I imagine once this moves along, there'll be some discussion of how we can do that best. But I can't sit here tonight and say I have a definite plan if we're going to use, how we're going to do it.
And then I guess my last question would be through the mayor to the town attorney. What rights will these part-time positions have to join a union and challenge the no benefits and win?
Well, the Connecticut labor law under the Municipal Employees Relations Act doesn't require that you work a minimum number of hours per week to be eligible to try to form a bargaining unit. So there's a whole series of steps that they would have to go through just to begin the process of trying to form a unit. They would not be, I don't believe at all, in the same bargaining unit as the police officers, because they're by statute the sworn officers that are within the police department. So it's possible that at some point that these folks would seek to form a collective bargaining unit and then attempt to bargain for that. Even if you get to that point, it's still a long way from getting benefit for someone who's working 15, 18, 20 hours a week. Most bargaining units that include part-time folks at best have some prorated piece on that. And to the extent that these are retired police officers, most of those have some level of health care benefits from their prior employer that they retired from. So there's generally not as big a drive for that. But again, that would have to come out in the process of negotiations with that.
Well, I guess that's what I'm getting at, is the Enfield officer doesn't have benefits. He gets $3,000 towards his package, and that's all he has.
Right.
And I mean, they join a union, the next year's contracts, they challenge for benefits. You know?
They certainly have the right to ask for them, yep.
Right. So this $26 an hour now becomes $60 an hour with benefits because that's what their union wanted.
Well, it would be hard-pressed, I think, to find an arbitration panel that would take part-time, truly part-time folks, not working 38 hours instead of 40, but 18 to 25 hours a week, and find full benefits granted to those folks.
Okay.
It's possible. I mean, it's legally, if you look at the statutes, it's legally possible. It just doesn't happen.
In past history,
right, it just
highly
doesn't
unlikely.
Right.
And I think the chief had answered with the 2 positions per school, that definitely makes it a part-time position. I feel a lot better with that. All right, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Ken. Councilman Lee.
Scott, through you to Matt, is there anything in the document that I'm missing that definitively states that these are civilian personnel versus sworn? I mean, using the word officer gives you the impression that it's a police officer or a sworn. Do we state civilian anywhere, or should we?
No, I don't think we need to state that they're civilian. Normally with that, we would have in their requirements that they either are, already have all the certifications and are sworn officers for a police officer, or they can obtain that. So, again, we're not requiring them to do that, so we wouldn't say that you don't have to do that if you're not requiring them to do that.
Okay. And under the highly desirable qualification, we're stating prior experience as a law enforcement officer. In your opinion, does that include folks with a particular military background?
We had this discussion, Mr. Lee, and I think the first ring, so to speak, is we want retired municipal or state officers. They don't have to be from Connecticut necessarily, but we want the law enforcement component, because we know that, at least in Connecticut, we're all standardized. We go through post, we know their training requirements, we know their qualifications and all that. Once that were to be exhausted, I think our intent is to strive to fill all the posts with law enforcement officers. If that's not possible, there was discussion about going to an outer ring and keeping it in the general realm of some type of law enforcement. There are other law enforcement agencies within our state that are firearm proficient. Primarily, there's the team at the prisons, the CERT team, that do probably far more firearm training than police officers. So, that might be somebody we look at. And you know what? I've always thought it was a good idea, too, at some point, if we've exhausted that, to look at returning people from Afghanistan and Iraq, especially people that, were assigned firearm-type training. So, there's a plan to go from inner and to outer. So, like I said, at this point, I have not publicly took out ads in the paper or whatever. And to be frank with you, every day I wake up saying, geez, I wonder how many people we're going to get. I don't know. I can tell you I spoke with the chief in Brantford, and they were hiring 12 positions. They had 55 applicants. So I asked them to ship them over here if he could. But I just don't know. We're going in uncharted waters here.
Thank you, Bill. Anyone else? Sensing none, roll call, please.
Chairman Copen,
4.
Deputy Mayor Nelson,
4.
Councilman Arnone,
4.
Councilman Bosco,
Present.
Councilman Crowley,
4.
Councilman Edgar,
Against.
Councilman Hall,
4.
Councilman Kinsler,
4.
Councilman Lee,
4.
and Councilman Stokes.
4.
8 in favor, and 1 against, and 1 present.
Thank you, Jeanette. Thank you, gentlemen. Any further, we don't have no need to go into executive session. So is there a motion to adjourn by Councilman Lee was first, Councilman Hall, all those in favor? Those opposed, we are adjourned. Thank you.